Hello, everyone, and welcome to the December 2nd episode of the LGS Pod, the Soccer Shorts companion podcast, where we highlight topics that impact our local grassroots soccer culture here in our hometown of San Diego, as well as across the U.S. and around the world. I'm John Cross, founder of Soccer Shorts, and with me tonight, as always, is our co-host, Dylan Wilson. Dylan, how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing well, freshly shaved and feeling good.
Oh, look at that.
Yes.
No shave November is over.
It sure is. Yeah, doing well.
Good. Any interesting news from the week before we jump into the show?
Not explicitly soccer related, but I think I'm setting up to get season tickets for the San Diego Mojo, which are our women's pro volleyball team here in town. This is their third season going in this year. I've gone to a handful of games, and it's honestly been a great time. And they're just out at Viejas, so I just hop on the 215 up on El Cajon Boulevard, and it takes me right there. So yeah, it's been fun. Looking forward to it.
Yeah,
support local sports.
Yeah, support all local sports. All right, well, let's give a little preview of what we're doing tonight, because this year is the 40th anniversary of the 1985 NCAA Men's College Cup final between UCLA and American University. It is a final that went 8 overtimes, and if you look it up on the internet or just search for longest college soccer match, this is what usually pops up. However, this is not the longest college soccer match ever played. It is the longest NCAA match ever played. But 9 years earlier, the NAIA had their tournament in 1976, and there was a semifinal match that took 14 overtime periods to determine a winner. And tonight, as the 2025 college season is getting close to wrapping up with all the tournaments, the D1, D2, D3, and the NAIA, both on the men's and the women's side, will be wrapping up over the next couple of weeks. We thought it'd be fun to take a look back at this game in 1985, but also the game in 1976, and look at these two soccer matches, which are two of the longest ever in the college game, and probably two of the longest ever in any match around the world of, without a weather break or anything else, playing straight through, just because of the quirky rules of college soccer. So we will jump into that a little bit later, but first, as we always do, we will jump into some of the week's news. And before we even do that, we're going to start off with some listener feedback, because last week, Dylan, we talked about, well, I did really, but talked about the soccer tournaments, and we said how there were no California teams left in the NCAA soccer tournaments. And really, I only looked at Division I and I looked through the NAIA, but I neglected to look at Division II and completely forgot about Point Loma Nazarene. And I give a huge shout out to one of our most frequent commenters and listeners, Puma, for pointing that out to me. But Point Loma Nazarene is still in the Division II playoffs. They're down to the final 8. They won again this last weekend. And because the team that they are going to face, Midwestern State out of Texas, they actually upset the number 1 seed, Stanislaus State. And since Point Loma is ranked higher than Midwestern State, that means Point Loma will have one additional home match out at Point Loma. So this Saturday at 1 o'clock, we will have an NCAA tournament game for the Point Loma Nazarene men's team at 1 o'clock again against Midwestern State Universities. So apologies to all our Point Loma Nazarene alumni, fans, etc., that we missed that last week. Thank you to Puma for pointing that to us. Glad we could relay the news to let everybody know that there is a match coming up this Saturday, and maybe get some people out there to see it.
I'll cop to totally forgetting, not catching that. I kind of, to be honest, having not really grown up here in San Diego and not gone to college here either, And I mean, like, absolutely no disrespect about this. It's purely a geographical thing, but I kind of forget Point Loma Nazarene exists sometimes, because it is not just in Point Loma, which is a part of town I don't go to often. It is in the tip of Point Loma, which is like a part of town I really don't get to. So yeah, I'll hand up. I totally missed that. So that's good for them. What is their mascot? I'm struggling to find that as I look real quick.
They're the Sea Lions, I believe, if I remember correctly.
Love that.
And, I don't think that's terribly uncommon about Point Loma, but they do have a rich soccer history in San Diego. Have been competitive, and this year, obviously, got a strong team, made it to the Final Eight. But yeah, unfortunately, I think since they're not Division I, they are a smaller school. They are way out there on the tip of Point Loma. I think they get the short end of the stick sometimes in media coverage, and we were certainly guilty of that last week. But we're going to do what we can to help support them, and hopefully, if they win and get to the Final Four, get some more interest in following Point Loma Nazarene, because we do have a history of winning national soccer titles here. And that brings us to our next segment, which is This Day in San Diego History. So keeping with our college soccer theme, which is going to be going on for the entire show, on this date, December 2nd, in 2001, UCSD was the site of the Division II Women's Final Four, and the UCSD women's team made it to the final. They won the final with a 2-0 victory over Christian Brothers University to claim back-to-back Division II titles in their first 2 years of Division II soccer. So they had been a Division III team for quite a while. They bumped up to Division II. They won it their first year in Division II, and today marks the anniversary of their second NCAA title in Division II for the UCSD women's soccer team. And then if you, to kind of go back a little history with UCSD, that they were a powerhouse in Division III. So if you count the 5 titles that they won at the Division III level, and then there are 2 that they won at Division II level, they have 7 national women's soccer titles altogether. It is, though, 2001 was the last time UCSD women have won a national title. But all their titles came under their coach, Brian McManus, legendary soccer coach in San Diego, coached for the Nomads for quite a number of years, coached the women's team at UCSD. 31 years he was at UCSD. In those 31 years, his teams made it to the semifinals or beyond in 15 of those 31 years. So they were quite the powerhouse. If you look back at some of their titles, there was a stretch of 7 years between 95 and 2001. So as they were finishing up in D3 and then moving into D2, where they won 6 titles in 7 years. So that's a little bit of San Diego soccer and college soccer history for us on this day, December 2nd, back in 2001.
Very cool.
And if we switch into some just 2025 Cup news for College Cup, all these soccer tournaments are getting close to wrapping up. The women Division I Final Four is coming up this weekend. I think most of the other tournaments, I think there's another grouping that might be in their Final Four. Most of them are in their Final 8. But there's a lot of college soccer, again, with the top teams left in their tournaments, respective tournaments happening this weekend. So there's a lot you can find out, or what you can watch over the weekend. But to give another little San Diego spin, especially on the women's D1, in the semifinals, one of the semifinals is TCU against Florida State, and there is a sophomore midfielder from University City High School, Kayla Martinez, who plays on TCU. She has been coming off the bench for some pretty regular playing time during most of the season, so there's a San Diego connection we have in that semifinal. But in the other semifinal, which is Stanford and Duke. And the Duke goalkeeper, sophomore Caroline Dysart, she is graduate of Canyon Crest Academy, and Stanford has several San Diegans. There are two that have been getting quite a lot of playing time this year, and that's sophomore defender Lizzie Boama from Francis Parker and freshman striker Ava Harrison from Del Norte High School, which is also Duran Free's alma mater. So, and she's been getting, even as a freshman, some decent time off the bench. So maybe she will get some time here in the semifinal as well.
Very cool. Just to clarify, you mean Duran Free with a perfect 1,000% save percentage in MLS Cup playoffs? Duran Free,
that one and same Duran Free.
Wow. Go figure.
Yeah, that was his. I mean, we might as well switch over to that for some other San Diego news. I mean, SDFC lost their match to Vancouver, as anybody who's following soccer here locally knows. But Duran Free did get the chance to get into the match late after a red card to the starting goalkeeper.
Completely deserved red card, to be fair.
Completely deserved.
It was
absolutely.
A bad challenge. Yeah.
He was left kind of stranded, and
he was.
And
they were chasing the game.
He committed and made. Yeah. He made the choice, and there was no one arguing on any side.
Not to suggest that there were. When you're chasing a do or die game like that, those sorts of things are going to happen. But as somebody who was mostly interested because of all the people I met through Loyal, it was pretty cool to have San Diego Loyal mentioned on the MLS broadcast.
Yeah, so got in 19-year-old. That was, I believe, again, because I'm not following SDFC, closely this year, just from a distance. Those were his first minutes, were they not, for the entire season?
Yeah, I'm almost certain. I'll double check that, but I'm almost certain.
Came in, made a big save, was really kind of under fire, just again coming in, chasing the game, and now you're down to 10 players. So wasn't the best showing SDFC had for their season, but that aside, remarkable season for a first-year team coming.
Absolutely. So, and they didn't choke early on like a lot of newer teams do when they have good seasons and then struggle in the playoffs. That was his first appeal. That was his MLS debut as well. So
yeah, so good. So we're gonna have to make note of that, because that will be one of our This Day in San Diego Soccer histories at some point.
Definitely.
But good for Duran Free, and hopefully he gets some more playing time. Actually, when I was stumbling across, I was trying to look for other San Diego connections in some of the other college matches, but it's such tedious work, if you haven't done it or followed before. So I'm digging into rosters and I'm looking for connections, and I can't remember where it was now, but there is, he's redshirting this year, but someone who is a former Loyal Select player is in a team who, I don't know if it was on the Division I listing or not, and now I can't remember the name of the player off the top of I just kind of skimmed over it because he's redshirting, so he wasn't going to get any chance to play, but I have it bookmarked somewhere so I can go back and take a look, so we can keep an eye on another former Loyal Select player who see if he has some success.
Speaking of, I found out a couple weeks ago, former Loyal Select player Davi Santos is playing professionally in the Brazilian third division now.
Yes. Yeah.
Which I think people hear third division, but Brazil has a pyramid that probably goes about as deep and as dense as England's pyramid. So third division is no joke in Brazil. So yeah, good for him.
Yeah, good for him. And that's something we'll have to, we talked about covering Brazil in part of our ProRel series and the pyramids and how they're designed. And Brazil certainly has an interesting structure with their parallel regional and national leagues. So we'll have to look into that another time and maybe dig in a little deeper to Davi's team and see how they're doing.
Definitely.
Yeah. and sticking with SDFC, the rumors are starting to fly again, and I blame Tom Bogert for this because I've seen him push it a little bit in a very like, if it happens maybe, but the Mo Salah, rumors to MLS, specifically to SDFC, seem to be starting up with Salah not starting the most recent Liverpool match here over the weekend, and just the other Egyptian connections with SDFC. Any thoughts on this? Because to me, well, I don't know. I'm going to let you, I'll share my thoughts in a second. I'll let you jump in.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that's probably people, seeing that Liverpool are having a struggle of a season, and Salah specifically, but he is still one of the best players in the Premier League. And I don't think anybody would really disagree with that. And like, with no disrespect to SDFC or MLS, he is still way too good. Like he can play at the top level still if he wants to. I guess he could maybe look to leave Liverpool. I don't see him coming to MLS. And if he did, all respect to SDFC, but I don't see him coming to San Diego. Whatever the Egyptian connection, I doubt that's as big of a deal as people make it out to be. When you consider how long Mo Salah's not lived in Egypt and the history of the owner of SDFC, whose name is escaping me right now, and I'm not going to pretend that I'm upset about that. Yes, Mansour. When you consider his history as it pertains to the Egyptian government and society, like, I don't know that there's necessarily a lot of love lost there between the two of them. And that's pure speculation. Maybe they're best friends. Maybe it's a Mesut Ozil and Erdogan type dealio. I have no idea. But I think to suggest that he would come here just because the owner is Egyptian is like naive at best. But I just don't see it. I don't see him coming to MLS. I think this is people taking the opportunity to stir up rumors because he, like we said, he's having a rough season. Liverpool's having a rough season. And SDFC's season just ended. So this is a good time to stir rumors, I guess.
Right. And there's a lot of ifs, but even if he were to be available and if he were interested, I guess it depends who wins out at SDFC. To me, I'll use Chucky Lozano as an example. To me, again, from what I was able to experience when I was involved with stuff, I don't think Chucky fits the right to dream style. Like, that wouldn't have been a player they would have pursued in terms of right to dream. I don't think he's necessarily been a bad fit for SDFC in this first year and doing what SDFC was doing, but I don't think anybody doubts Chucky was signed to SDFC to sell tickets and generate interest because of his huge following. It wasn't because of his style of play fit with right to dream. And I think if Mo Salah were to come, it would be purely for those reasons. Again, I don't. Yeah. I mean, not that someone can't fit in with the system anyway. I think Chucky has done fine fitting in with the system. Not much different than a lot of the other people who were not right to dream people. And SDFC really has to round out their roster for a few years before the full right to dream style is implemented and they're bringing in all the young players. But, and again, this is whoever makes the decision. So if Mo Salah was available, to me, if you got your marketing guys involved, they're going to want Mo Salah because they're going to want to use that. And if the right to dream people are involved, I think they'd rather see the money be spent on investing in more of these good young players that we saw playing for this team and really investing in those players rather than someone who's, winding down his career, even though he's still one of the best players. That to me is so different than the entire right to dream model. It seems like that is the opposite of what you want to do with your team. But again, who's going to make that decision? Is it the marketing guys making the decision, or is it the right to dream guys making that decision? If he were even available in the first place.
And I mean, if you're given the opportunity to sign a player like Mo Salah, like, I mean, I'm not saying don't, because you should. It's, he's one of the best players on the planet. He that is the caliber of player that would get me to go to an SDFC game, like, and pay for my ticket, not just like mooch off somebody who has an extra. There's not a lot of players in the world I could say that about, and he's one of them. So like, I totally get it from that perspective. But I just, from the player side, I just don't see it. I still, he may be on the back end of his prime, but he's still in his prime. He's what, in his early 30s now. It's with modern sports science, guys like Lewandowski are like in their late 30s, still tearing it up in sunny Barcelona. So I don't see him, even if he leaves Liverpool, I just don't see him like hanging up the boots, so to speak, to the point where he's coming to MLS. And I guess people would take issue with that, but like that, there's still some truth to that. Like, I'm not, honestly, I think a player like Son or Messi, obviously, could have still played in the Premier League and didn't, for various reasons. But I don't think the draw for international players to MLS has changed as much as some people would like to think that it has. And I just don't see Mo Salah, and the very like driven player that I know he is, like, just settling like that. I think he's more likely to, pursue something like one of the other top clubs in Europe, or, you got to imagine Saudi Arabia would throw just like as much money as he could ask at him.
They will absolutely throw money at
not
him,
just because he's one of the best players in the world, but he's the best Arab player in the world, I think, and probably the best Muslim player in the world as well. So it's like, that's a whole like marketing kettle of fish that I don't see Saudi Arabia like allowing anybody else to cash in on. And I could be totally wrong about this. I might be thinking of somebody else. So if we have any Liverpool fan listeners, they will probably correct me if I'm wrong. But I swear I've heard that Mo Salah has said, like, when he starts to wind down his career, his plan is to go back and play in Egypt or somewhere in Africa. I could be thinking of somebody else, but I swear I've seen that he said that. So like, I just, before we even think about like the SDFC financials or club ethos or whatever, I just don't see it from the players' side.
Yeah, I think it's a stretch, but certainly, again, off season, as you said, season's wrapped up for
silly
SDFC.
Season, we like to call it,
right? Yeah. So we're and after signing Messi, any name that comes up is going to be thrown about as a potential for Major League Soccer to sign. I think that's just going to be part of off-season rumors all the time.
Well, and it's also part of the nature of the way we do sports here. Like, not even just the way we do soccer. Like, the whole off season is about, trade rumors and I mean, it's not like that's a uniquely American thing, but like, this is just how we do it. It's the 24/7 news cycle, but applied to sports.
That is the truth. And then if we're sticking to the off season and our local professional sports teams, you may feel like we're getting deep into the off season for the Wave, but we had mentioned this on an earlier podcast. The Wave, and they actually put their roster out for the World Sevens. The Wave, and I forget which other NWSL team is participating, but 2 NWSL teams are participating in the World Sevens.
Wait, so is this like a 7-a-side tournament?
Yeah, and that's coming up this weekend. And
I didn't know that was a thing.
Yeah, and so I forget who's broadcasting it or where you can find it, but look online. It's the World Sevens. It's coming up this weekend. The Wave are participating, and there's some strong names on there, like Kaylin Sheridan is one of the goalkeepers that's listed. I really thought it was going to be a lot of their, second string kind of players, non-starters, but there's seem to be bringing a decent-ish team out there, and I think the whole tournament takes place this weekend, if I remember correctly. It's pretty fast the way it goes together. So that'll be coming up this weekend, so look for that. If you want some fix of Wave, and you're missing out on the Wave here during the off season. And then the bid book dropped also for the 2031 World Cup. So the U.S. bid book, along with, I can't even remember which teams now are all part of this ever expanding bid of countries. But one of, they listed the stadiums in terms of the U.S. specifically, and one of them was Snapdragon. Now, always in these bid books, they list kind of a Dylan, what do you think the odds are that Snapdragon will host some, and San Diego as well, host some 2031 Women's World Cup matches when the tournament gets here?
Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question. I think, it would seem like the right kind of venue. It's in a city with, a women's soccer team that's relatively well supported. It's a good sized stadium, I think, for the Women's World Cup. I think, like, not to say that they couldn't fill like a stadium like SoFi, but I just don't think that's like the atmosphere they're going for, right? I think like one of the things about women's soccer and the Women's World Cup is like I don't know, my perception has always been like the atmosphere is really good. Like it's intimate, and that's something that was important. And it's one of the things that the New Zealand did really well when they hosted. They picked appropriately sized stadiums that were, created these really good atmospheres. So I would think Snapdragon might fit that category, even though I guess I wouldn't necessarily agree with the idea that it's an atmospheric stadium. But I guess if I were FIFA, I would look at like the absolute comedy of errors of that is the like handful of international games that have been played at Snapdragon already, and wonder if that's actually something I want to be, gambling with, because it's not gone very well. And this is like a super new stadium, and they've already had to replace the field several times, and it's gotten flooded to the point a game should have been called off. Like,
right.
I guess it in theory makes a lot of sense, but in practice has not gone very well. And it does make you wonder, at what point do they just say, we're going to start looking elsewhere?
Yeah, I think San Diego is a strong candidate to be a host city as a city. I think Snapdragon could be a good venue, but as you pointed out, there's been some problems. They got a few years to work not too many years, because they'll make the decisions coming up fairly soon here, because you have to have enough time to prepare. But hopefully, I mean, I personally, selfishly, I would love to see some World Cup matches here in San Diego, because the Women's World Cup or Youth World Cups are probably all we're going to get at the moment until the Women's World Cup gets bigger, and then we're probably going to be, kind of priced out of that one as well,
right?
So to speak. But I think we're a good city and a venue. I think they would like to be in San Diego. We just, unfortunately, our, I'll use very loose air quotes around it, soccer specific stadium that we have has not been great, as you said, for international matches. And in the summertime, if you're going to play day games so you can market yourselves to a European audience, could be absolutely brutal. And we've seen that before in Snapdragon.
Literally the very first game played at Snapdragon, like hundreds of people got heat stroke. Yeah. Literally the first game. Like it just, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, what a farce it would be if we had a World Cup game played here in San Diego and it wasn't at the stadium that would be less than 10 years old at that point.
Yeah.
Why did we even build it then? It's just, anyway, that's getting ahead of ourselves, but I don't know. It's silly that that's even really a question.
Well, and then, the last big news, if we stay along World Cups, is of course we have the World Cup draw this Friday, and, the awarding of the FIFA Peace Prize and whatever other shenanigans are going on for the 3 hours of the draw. I think it's 3 hours is what it's listed as. So I don't know, Dylan. I will probably at some point maybe tune in. I don't know if I will. I'm not planning on watching it, but I don't really have anything going on Friday, like to keep myself distracted. I know social media will be flooding with information. It's not
Yeah.
like you can avoid it. And, whether I watch the moment that the USA, for each team the USA faces is not going to change whether I watch it when it happens or find out about it an hour
Right.
later in a post. So these draws, they've never been of huge interest to me anyway. But it also feels a little bit like a train wreck.
Yeah,
Just
I
kind of
mean, yeah.
watching the train wreck. So yeah, but for anybody who's maybe been in a cave, that is happening this Friday. And we'll know who the U.S. men's national team will play by Saturday. We'll know exactly where and when, times and all the stadia. So those will be announced 24 hours later. Probably, I'm guessing, so they could figure out for teams like Iran and Haiti, probably make sure they get grouped in Canada and Mexico, not in the
Well,
U.S.
see, that's the thing
Yeah.
is like there's only a couple of ways they could structure a team's preliminary round such that they have no games in the U.S. because there's only what 6 total venues that are not in the U.S. I mean,
Yeah,
so
I can't remember. It's something like that. Yeah.
so there's only so many teams they could do that with.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll know the schedule by the time of next week's show. I'm sure we'll have a couple of words about it. And we will certainly, as we said last week, in last week's episode, we talked about some of the storylines. We will probably dig a little deeper, especially into some of the interesting CONCACAF storylines like Curacao and some of the debutante teams, some of the teams that haven't been in there for a while, and get some cool sporting storylines as we approach the World Cup. All right, well, that brings us to our main topic, which is kind of two different stories. So this will probably go a little bit longer than our other ones in terms of segments. But let's start first with the 1985 tournament, since this is the 40th anniversary of this final, which is the longest NCAA soccer match in history. It took 8 overtimes, 166 minutes and 5 seconds total game time. So we're talking getting close to 3 hours of gameplay. It was a kind of traditional East Coast, West Coast matchup. You had on the West Coast UCLA, obviously in LA, and you had American University, which is based out of Washington, D.C. It was for American University, their very first trip to the final. They were led by a great player and goal scorer, Michael Brady. I want to be careful I don't say Bradley and slip up, but Michael Brady. And he was the Soccer America Player of the Year that year, which is a similar kind of award like the Herman Trophy, but done by Soccer America magazine. So he was the winner for Soccer America, and he was a finalist for the Herman Trophies. So they had strong player there in Michael Brady. He was born in Chicago, but actually, I think when he was less than a year old, family moved, I want to say back to England, but anyway, moved to Coventry. So he was raised in Coventry and then came back to the U.S. for education, obviously in college, and to play soccer. So that was American University, and that was not atypical for American universities specifically to get a lot of these. And even though Michael Brady is an American because he was born here, he really grew up outside of the U.S. And in addition to Michael Brady, there were 7 starters on that American University team that were international students. And this was not uncommon in college soccer coming up through the 70s especially. But in the 80s, things started to change a little bit. You had a lot more American players who had grown up playing youth soccer, which became very popular through the 70s. So in the 80s, we started to see this transformation, and UCLA was it had a very different approach. Their team was very strongly made up of Southern Californians, and we'll explain why here in a second. So for UCLA, it was their fourth trip to the final. They'd been there 3 previous times in 70, 72, and 73, lost all 3 of them, and lost all 3 of them to St. Louis University. This was another kind of thing about soccer coming through 60s, 70s, and into the 80s. There were these dynasties of teams before we got more talent, and talent started spreading out a little more, and coaching started to get better across the university and college landscape. But St. Louis in that early 70s time period, St. Louis University was one of the standout universities. UCLA was led by Dale Irvine. He ended up he played outdoors well, but a big indoor star. I think spent quite a bit of his professional career with the Wichita Wings. He kind of had the opposite experience as Michael Brady from American University. He was born in Belfast, but was raised in Southern California. So he was there along with some other prominent Southern California players, names like one here that you probably heard of, Paul Caligiuri, right? Scored the famous goal against Trinidad and Tobago in '89 to send the U.S. to the World Cup. He was part of that World Cup team in 1990, and it was also joined by his UCLA teammates from this team, Paul Crumpy and David Vanol, who was a backup goalkeeper. So that Southern California reach came all the way down to San Diego. We had a couple of prominent San Diegans that were part of this team that made it to the final. One of them was Steve Black, graduate from Poway High School, who was a starter in the midfield. And Andy Burke, who was a defender, he's graduate of Bishop's in La Jolla, but he had broken his foot early in the season and, was recovering. By the time the final rolls around, he was suited up, but he, hadn't played any of the playoffs, hadn't, missed, I think, the last 10 games of the regular season. So he was recovering and just kind of out of the rotation, so to speak, as we get into this final match. UCLA's coaches, you had head coach Siggy Schmid and assistant coach Steve Sampson. Steve Sampson, if anybody who doesn't know, went on a few years later to win a national championship with Santa Clara University. He also became an assistant coach under Bora Milutinovic for the 1994 World Cup, and then became the men's national team coach for 1998. The year that we did the worst ever showing, came in last place of the 32 teams. So that was Steve Sampson, the assistant coach. And then Siggy Schmid, he was actually a UCLA grad. He played soccer for UCLA. He was the first American ever to get a scholarship, and had a similar story to a lot of other people who played soccer, where he's born in Germany, came over, I think, when he was 4, grew up in Southern California. I think it was Torrance. Ended up going to UCLA, became the first American ever to get a scholarship, a soccer scholarship for UCLA. He actually played on the 72 and 73 teams that lost in those finals. So 2 of those 3 teams that had lost, he was a starting midfielder for. He was starting midfielder for all 4 years for them before he became, and then eventually became coach of the men's team. Siggy Schmid, because of his experience, not being anti-foreigner at all, but really in someone who wanted to help grow the game here in the United States, was very adamant about recruiting Americans specifically. And he really just looked in his backyard and you look at those UCLA teams under Siggy Schmid, and they were heavily populated with players from Southern California. And he very famously stated he would not recruit foreigners. He would not go out to seek to recruit them. If someone wanted to come and play and earn a spot and get a scholarship, great. He wasn't going to turn anybody away, but he wasn't going to actively spend any time recruiting any foreign players or foreign students to come play for UCLA. So that team, the 86 team, and some of those teams right around there were just littered with good Southern California soccer players. And some of the best, I remember that time, like that was where you wanted to play, was UCLA, if you were a good player. The referee for that match also was a 24-year-old Brian Hall, and anybody who's followed soccer in this country over the last few decades should recognize that name. He was 4-time MLS Referee of the Year. He refereed in the 2002 World Cup, and he actually became the very first CONCACAF Director of Referees. So we have a lot of history of people all tied in to this game, especially on the UCLA side. The match itself, it was played in the Kingdome, which doesn't exist anymore, up in Seattle. And it was an indoor arena, for those people who are too young to remember, on that old style AstroTurf, like cement underneath and turf laid over it with just maybe a little bit of foam. It was very unforgiving on the knees. So again, to keep that in mind for this game that went 8 overtimes. Steve Black, the Poway High School graduate, was starting midfielder for the team. He suffered a slight shoulder separation in the semifinal. They weren't sure if he was going to be able to start, but come game time, they felt he was okay to play. So he did start and play in the final. And then, as we said, Andy Burke, it was unlikely that he was going to see the field because he's coming back from the injury, didn't play at any of the playoffs, missed the last 10 games, just kind of out of the rotation. So he was there, but at the beginning of the match wasn't looking like he was going to be getting in anywhere along the way. We know the match, because we already gave it away at the beginning, goes to 8 overtimes. But the format is very interesting for these finals at this time. Now, the NCAA has changed their formats like they do for lots of things. They change it frequently. The penalty kick shootout did exist, and it was used in earlier rounds, just not in the final. In the final, they wanted a winner. So as long as it needed to go, it was going to go till you got a winner. So there were 2 10-minute overtimes, and then after that, it was followed by 10-minute sudden death periods, which is, I think, what we still called it then before we got to sudden victory and golden goal and the other names that have been used. So they obviously, finished the game. It was 0-0. They finished their first 2 overtime periods. So we get into the 3rd overtime period, and a player from American University gets ejected for headbutting one of the UCLA players. So they go down to 10 men. No one scores still. We get through the 4th, 5th, and 6th overtime. Still, nobody has scored. And again, have to remember, college soccer still, I think, does it. But at this time, it's free substitution. So it doesn't matter whether you started a game and come off. You can come back in later. So coaches are constantly cycling through their players, trying to keep the freshest legs on the field. At the end of the 6th overtime, still no score. And as the UCLA coaches are looking down the bench in the 2nd overtime, they get to Andy Burke and say, "You're going in," right? He's got fresh legs, hasn't played a competitive match in a long time, right? But just at this point, it's, hey, everybody's exhausted out there. Hopefully the fresh legs will do something. So again, still nobody scores at the end of the 7th overtime. We get into 8th overtime, and the key player for American University, Michael Brady, starts developing severe leg cramps. Now, this is one of those interesting things that it's hard to pin down, because I went to several resources to kind of get exactly what happened here in the 8th overtime. It's clear that Michael Brady had cramps. If you look at some sources, they say Michael Brady limped off the field, thus reducing his team to 9 players, while he could get treatment, rather than going down on the field for the referee to stop the play. That's one version of events I read. Another version of events is that he did go down, and the referee refused to stop play. I don't know which is accurate, but either way, American University is effectively down to 9 players. UCLA is able to capitalize on this, and in the 167th minute, they find themselves up on a 2-on-1 opportunity. The ball comes to Burke with his fresh legs. He slots in a left-footed shot from 13 yards out to score the winning goal, and finish the game finally and win the very first national championship for UCLA. So we have a couple other comments we'll get to kind of in aftermath of this, but Dylan, we'll let you jump in with any comments here.
That's almost 2 full games. That sounds awful.
Well, that's kind of the comments from the players. If you go and read some of the newspaper accounts, like they celebrated afterwards. They were all excited. And I read one story where there was a parent in whatever hotel they were staying at in Seattle, rented a room, like a party room, a celebration room. And several of the players, like, I don't know who went to it because I didn't go to it. I just went to bed. They were just absolutely exhausted. There were several players like, yeah, I don't know who went. Because obviously it was reserved ahead of time. They were hoping to have it as a celebration, maybe in regulation, but not after 8 overtimes. But, this is one of those matches that I think a lot of people know about it or maybe have loosely heard about it, but don't know some of the San Diego connections. Andy Burke from Bishop's High School, after being injured and not playing for the last 10-ish games of the season and not playing any of the playoff games, doesn't come in till the 7th overtime, just because they're going down the bench and just trying to get some fresh legs, is the one able to get in there and score the winning goal. Along with some of the other players that we had on the team. Michael Brady, the key player for American University, he didn't win this title, but come the summer, he wins the National Amateur Cup with one of the local DC teams. I think it was Club España. Won the National Amateur Tournament that year, National Amateur Cup. So he still got himself a trophy the same year. And this game, even though it's listed as, again, if you look at it, the longest college match, but technically the longest NCAA match, it beat the previous record by just 7 minutes. In 1982, Indiana beat Duke, also in 8 overtimes, and it was 159 minutes and 16 seconds. Right, so just 7 minutes longer was this match. So we had 2 finals that had gone in a 3-year span that had gone to deep into overtime periods. So there was a lot of conversation about changing the rules, and I couldn't pin this down exactly when I was looking at the research, but I think something was implemented for the very next year to limit the number of overtimes. Because by the time we get to 1989, there was a final. It went to 4 overtimes, and they called it, and they granted co-champions to both those teams. One of those teams was Santa Clara, whose coach was Steve Sampson, who was the assistant coach for the UCLA team, who he said went on to coach the U.S. men's national team at the '98 World Cup. National team. So, in '89 we get co-champions. So then they finally institute, penalty kicks to decide the championship as we get into 1990, which then becomes the first men's final to be decided by a penalty shootout. And the winner there was UCLA again for their second national championship. So those are just some of the things that kind of happened afterwards. And we are now finally at a point in college soccer where we'll play the overtimes. I don't know if we're back to golden goal or not, but I think the overtime period still might be golden goal. Yeah, and then we go to a penalty shootout after 2. So, but that was this story. I originally picked it and kind of timed it for this episode because of its, it's 40 years since it happened. The San Diego connections, the winning goal scored by San Diegan, a graduate of Bishop's High School. But as I was doing some of the fact checking for this, I actually stumbled across a game that's even longer than this that happened 9 years earlier. So before we get into that, Dylan, I'll let you jump in with any comments.
I'm just surprised it was able to happen twice in the span of 3 or 4 years. I would think that after the first time a game went to 7 or 8 overtimes, they would say, surely we can't let this happen again, especially in a sport like. Did I lose you for a sec?
Yeah, I think I lost everyone for a second. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. I'm surprised it was able to happen like that in such short succession. You said twice in 3 or 4 years. Like, I would think surely after the first time, especially in a game like soccer, they would say, we can't let this happen again, So I'm surprised it was allowed to happen again.
Well, I think especially if you look at it in 2025 and the way we look at player safety nowadays, people wouldn't. I think we look back at this kind of stuff. I mean, I graduated from high school in 85. So I remember this as my freshman year in college for this College Cup. And, I remember thinking, well, it would be exhausting, but wouldn't that be cool to play 8 over, just a different frame of thinking when you're 18, 19 years old.
Yeah.
But I think nowadays, I think this is the whole reason we have this recent white paper on college sports. I mean, one of the many reasons is college season crams so many matches together in such a short period of time. The travel is ridiculous. The turnaround time for games are ridiculous. And if you think this is bad, wait till we talk about this 1976 final, which the schedule is absolutely brutal. I can't believe people played under these conditions, that we even allowed people to play under these conditions. But we'll get into that in just a second. All right. Am I back?
Yes, there you go.
Okay. I keep losing my connection here. So I will try to jump through here. Let's get to the 1976 semifinal. So as we said, 9 years earlier, 1976, there was a game that lasted about an hour longer. It went to 14 overtimes.
Jesus Christ.
It was the 1976 NAIA men's soccer tournament, and it was a semifinal match between Quincy University and Simon Fraser University. It took place at the Rose Bowl in Pasadena. Simon Fraser University is the, as far as I'm aware of, the only Canadian university that actually participates in the American system rather than within the Canadian system. And they've been doing that for quite a while. And they were doing it in several sports, but I think more recently, a lot of their sports have gone back into the Canadian system. But soccer, I believe, still plays in the American college system. And they're based out of Vancouver. And Quincy University is out of Illinois. So Quincy University, it's a private Franciscan college that was founded in 1860 and in Illinois, and they didn't start men's soccer program until 1964, so about 100 years later. But they very, very quickly became a powerhouse. And like we said, at this time, we had these dynasties of teams. They won their first 2, actually, back-to-back titles in 66 and 67. So in their 3rd and 4th year, they won the national championship for the NAIA tournament. Then they won another one in 1971. Then became the first team to three-peat by winning titles in 73, 74, and 75. So they're the 3-time defending champions coming into this tournament. And 6 titles in the 12 seasons that they've existed, basically. So they're looking to claim their 4th title, and they're coming up against Simon Fraser University, which had just started their men's program in 1974. But in 1974, Simon Fraser makes it all the way to that championship match. And we know, because we just said it, that Quincy was the one who won in 75. So the reports that I've read seem to be that Simon Fraser dominated most of the play of the game, looked like the better team, only to give up a goal with 29 seconds left in the match. And again, for those not super familiar with college soccer, they usually use a countdown clock. Everybody sees the clock, and when it hits 0, the match is over. So they gave up the goal in the last minute and lost the final. That, by most of the reports I read, they seem to have dominated. So here's a school that comes on the scene in their very first year all the way to the final, but loses the final. So here we are now at the 76 NAIA tournament. The way the NAIA did it, at least for this year, was they take their final 8 all to teams left. They play on a weekend. And then if you win on that weekend, and you know that you're going to make it to this final 8 and make it to the Rose Bowl, you got to arrange your travel. You got to get down to Pasadena. You're going to play a quarterfinal match on Wednesday. If you win that, you're going to play your semifinal match the very next day. And then you're going to play your final on Saturday. And then they did a 3rd place game. So if you lost on Wednesday, you were done. But if you won on Wednesday, you're playing on Thursday and Saturday, no matter what. So again, crazy schedule to play on the previous weekend, travel, and then play 3 games in 4 days. Especially if you want to win the final, you're going to have to win 3 games in 4 days. So both teams, Simon Fraser and Quincy, easily win their quarterfinal match. Simon Fraser has their 5-1 victors over Spring Arbor from Michigan, and Quincy has a 4-0 victory over Houghton. And because of the seeding and how they're matched up, they meet in the semifinals for a rematch of the 75 finals. So the match in All right, I feel like I keep cutting out.
Oh yeah, I lost you for a sec there. Ooh, I think I lost you again. I'm not sure, John, if you can hear me. Stand by, folks. We're experiencing some technical difficulties. Okay, looks like it's just me for now. Please stand by. Oh, all right. I think John's back. There we go.
Okay. I am back. I really apologize for this, but we'll try to wrap this up quickly. I think I know where I cut off last time, but the match ended 1-1 regulation. Needed 14 overtimes to actually decide a winner. And again, remember, we have unlimited subs. But finally, and we won't go to as many details for this game, but we do get a winner in the 14th overtime period. So it was actually scored after 221 minutes and 43 seconds. So awful. More than 3.5 hours. Brutal. So Simon Fraser wins. Right? They get revenge for last year's final. They win this match, and then 2 days later, they have to play a final, which they actually win 1-0 in regulation, I believe. So luckily for them. But they actually capture the title that year in their second year in existence as a men's soccer program, which is quite outstanding. But Quincy didn't have to wait very long to actually get 4 titles in a row because they were the winners in 77, 78, 79, 80, and 81. So after losing that semifinal match, they came back and won the next 5 titles until Simon Fraser claimed the titles in 82 and 83. So between the two schools, they claimed every NAIA men's soccer title between 1971 and 1983. So it's a little history for us here for the NAIA men's soccer. And the match that I think gets forgotten about because it's not an NCAA match, it's an NAIA college match. So I think usually if you look up in Google or something else, especially now with all the AI driven stuff, it's less likely you will stumble across this 1976 match that went 14 overtimes. I really tried to look to see if there was a San Diego connection here for this, but there wasn't. I couldn't find any San Diego connection for this match.
But still
crazy 14 overtime period.
Just ridiculous.
I as a much older person now thinking back, I don't see how anybody could play that.
I went for a run today after work before we started recording. And I mean, I haven't run as much as I used to, so I'm pretty out of shape. But I got back thinking like, oh, that was probably a solid 25, 30-minute run. It was 14 minutes. So yeah, I don't know how these people did that for nearly 3 hours.
Yeah, that's crazy. And thankfully, we don't do that anymore. And probably, I would say what probably drove most of the changes was less about player safety and more about getting on television.
Yeah, I bet.
I think TV and TV restrictions, and if you wanted to get your College Cup final on TV somewhere, then that probably helped force some of the restrictions. Because you don't want to show the match and then not show the ending because your linear broadcast station has decided to move on to whatever the next event is. But I would imagine the opportunity to be on television probably drove more of those decisions than anything else.
Yes, I would believe that. That's very American.
It is very American. And hopefully we can see some more, I don't know, reimagining of college and college soccer to get it more in line with the rest of the world over these next couple of years. Because this, frankly, we in 2025 we've got all our college tournaments wrapping up here over the next couple of weeks. This might be the last time we have them happening here in December, or the college season kind of wrapping up at this time of year. Starting next year, there's a, I don't know, 50-50 chance that we start seeing some changes and the college season runs a full year and we get the soccer tournaments happen in the spring rather than in the winter, right as we're getting into the holiday break.
Yeah. I can't say I will, miss this old college format. I don't know, maybe it's just my perception, but college soccer in America has always felt very amateurish compared to other college sports. And I guess you could say, well, no shit, they are amateurs, but I think you know what I mean by that. It's not treated very seriously at most of these institutions. So yeah, I think this move to professionalize college soccer really will only be a good thing.
Yeah, Hope so. And, if you're interested again in watching, we got tons of college soccer happening over this weekend and next. Um, and well, I'll get to the other comment here in just a second. But Dylan, since I think we're at the end of our episode here, what soccer plans do you have for the upcoming week?
That's a good question. I might tune into the MLS final. I don't know. I guess the Mueller versus Messi storyline is kind of interesting. But other than that, not too much. Just kind of keeping up with the European leagues.
Yeah, it's funny. You mentioned the MLS final. And as I was prepping for the show and thinking about some of the things I might want to tune into this weekend, that didn't even occur to me. It totally slipped my mind because I was debating. So I'll put this out there just to remind people. I was debating whether to try to catch the Point Loma match on Saturday at 1:00, but unfortunately for me, that's like right in my prime nap time, and it's really hard for me to work around that if I don't get my nap in, which sounds horrible every time I say it. I feel like a toddler, but that's my medical situation right now. So
I call it a siesta, and I think it'll feel more mature.
Yeah, maybe I should. So I just don't know if I can swing that, just the distance I have to drive there and back. Otherwise, it's just going to mess me up for the evening. So I might try to catch that on streaming.
Do you know if it will be streaming? I would assume so.
I saw a link for it. If you go to the NCAA site, and get to their soccer tournament things for Division II on the men's side, I saw a link for it to be streamed there. So I'm pretty sure if it's not somewhere else, it'll be there. I don't know if it'll be on something like ESPN Plus as well.
I mean, I would hope it would be, but I also wouldn't be surprised if it weren't.
Right. But I'm going to try to catch that if I can. I'm sure I will catch something with the draw on Friday. I will try to catch whatever college soccer I can this weekend. I'm going to try to catch some of the Wave 7s if I can.
I'll have to look into that
when that's happening. But actually next week, I'm also, because the first day should be Tuesday, so the same day we have our live broadcast next week. We're going to get the Champions League crossover show on CBS Sports. I'm actually looking forward to see how that plays out, since we have the men's Champions League and the women's Champions League on the same week, the same days this week, rather than alternating weeks as they've been doing for the rest all the fall leading up to this.
So will their usual whip around show just be whipping around between all games? Is that
that's what I'm interested to see, because the last I saw when they were talking about it, like they're the team in London that does the men's side, Thierry Henry and everyone, they were talking about inviting all the women that are here in the US that are covering the women's league, but getting them all together in London to do a big show. So I'm going to look forward to that and see how
that would be interesting, because those teams are actually, well, I can't speak for the women's side, but on the men's side, that Thierry Henry team is actually not the ones that do the whip around show. It's Nico Cantor.
Right. Nico Cantor does the whip around show.
And the other guy who's really mean to Nico Cantor on the whip around show, whose name is escaping me.
I know you said that, and now his name's escaping me, and I.
But you know what I'm talking about. He is like really mean to Nico Cantor sometimes. You're like, oh, buddy, chillax.
Yeah, I think they're good friends. That's just
I'm sure, but it just it's funny sometimes. It seems to go one way sometimes.
But yeah, I'm looking forward to that next week. But definitely this weekend, I think my brain will be on college soccer, and I'm going to try to put that Point Loma game, front and center in what I'm doing, which is probably for me, I'm going to have to be watching it at home. Easier to work my nap around that when I can be at home and maybe come into the game, a little bit later.
Totally fair.
All right. Well, I guess that wraps up an episode for us here for the LGS pod. As always, we'd like to hear from you, questions, comments, or, like our good friend Puma, keeping us honest with our content, especially if we misspeak or miss something. So please drop us a note. You can leave us comments on our YouTube channel. You can contact us via socials on Blue Sky at soccershorts.bigpinedigital.com. Or you can send us a text if you're listening to us on a podcasting app. Look above the description and there's a little link that says send us a text. Or if you're available, you can always join us live. We usually record our show on Tuesday nights at 6 o'clock Pacific time. All right, Dylan, any last comments before we head out?
No, I don't think so. I already mentioned about San Diego Mojo. I'm pretty excited about that. So, yeah, looking forward to, like we said, supporting local sports. And yeah, let me know if you do find a stream for that PLNU game, because I think I will have some time Saturday.
All right, I will let you do that, and yeah, let me know some of the dates for the Mojo. I might try to
totally
for a game or two. Probably absolutely not the season, but we'll try to find a game I can get out to.
Yeah. Sounds great.
All right, that wraps up everything for us. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for another episode of the LGS Pod, and we will see everyone again next week. Good night.